Socrates is remembered as one of the greatest lovers of wisdom in human history, a figure whose entire life revolved around the pursuit of truth, virtue, and the examined life. Yet when we look at the end of his life, it is hard to ignore the striking paradox. His wisdom did not protect him. He was condemned to death by his city, treated as a corruptor of youth and enemy of the gods, and accepted execution with calmness. For many, this shows the nobility of his character, but it also raises a troubling question. If wisdom is supposed to be supreme, why did it fail to prevent his downfall? From one angle, the answer is that Socrates' wisdom, though deep, was incomplete. He believed that knowledge and virtue alone would be sufficient to bring light into human affairs. But he did not account for the possibility that there are times in history when wisdom simply cannot find fertile ground. This idea is captured in Indian thought through the theory of Kaliyuga, the age of decline in which truth and virtue lose their power in social life. If Socrates had known of this theory, he might have realized that wisdom cannot always be applied, because the conditions of the age itself may block its effectiveness. Socrates assumed that people, when confronted with truth, could be persuaded by rational dialogue. His endless questioning of Athenians in the Agora was based on the faith that human beings desire truth, and that exposing contradictions in their beliefs would lead them toward wisdom. But his method only angered many of his contemporaries, because instead of being enlightened, they felt humiliated, destabilized, and threatened. In the context of Kaliyuga, this makes sense. An age dominated by ignorance and ego is not an age in which people will joyfully welcome truth. They will cling to their illusions, defend their interests, and attack the messenger. Socrates' ignorance was not about morality or reasoning, but about the reality that there are cosmic and historical cycles in which virtue does not rule. He believed reason could overcome ignorance at any time, but the Kaliyuga theory would say otherwise. In dark ages, wisdom is not easily received, no matter how clear or true it is. This sheds light on why Socrates' death feels both tragic and inevitable. His wisdom was not false, but it lacked application in his own time. Athens, consumed with politics, instability, and resentment after the Peloponnesian War, was not ready to embrace radical honesty and constant questioning. His belief that philosophy could guide society proved to be a kind of fantasy in that particular age. His refusal to compromise was admirable, but it also sealed his fate. If one accepts the framework of Kaliyuga, then Socrates did not fail because he was wrong, but because he misjudged the age he lived in. He sought to plant the seeds of wisdom in soil that was too dry and barren to support growth. The same problem continued with Plato, his most famous student, who sought to preserve his teacher's vision by constructing elaborate philosophical systems. Plato's Republic imagines a society governed by philosopher kings, where wisdom and justice are institutionalized in political life. This vision has inspired countless thinkers in the West and is still studied as one of the foundations of political philosophy. Yet it too has never been realized. No state has been successfully built on Plato's design, and attempts to inject philosophy directly into politics often stumble against the same problem that destroyed Socrates. People resist wisdom, especially when it threatens power, wealth, or established norms. In this sense, Plato also lived in a kind of fantasy land, thinking that a perfect republic could emerge from rational principles alone, without recognizing that the age may not allow such a vision to manifest. The enduring appeal of the Republic shows the human longing for a society grounded in truth, but its repeated failure to be applied shows that this longing often clashes with the reality of ages dominated by conflict, self-interest, and decline. Even today, the West continues to venerate Socrates and Plato as the founding figures of philosophy. Their ideas are read in universities, invoked in debates about ethics and politics, and celebrated as milestones of human reason. But the gap between wisdom and application remains. Modern societies still honor the principle that truth should guide life, yet the actual practice of politics, business, and culture is dominated by forces that resemble the conditions of Kaliyuga: greed, competition, manipulation, and short-term gain. Just as Athens silenced Socrates, today's world often marginalizes or ignores voices that speak inconvenient truths. The persistence of this pattern suggests that the problem lies not only in individuals, but in the cycles of history themselves. If the Kaliyuga theory is correct, then wisdom may always struggle to find application in certain times, no matter how brilliant or noble its expression. Thus, Socrates' death can be understood as a lesson in the limits of wisdom. It is not that wisdom is useless or false, but that it cannot always conquer the conditions of its age. Socrates believed that wisdom was supreme and clung to this belief until the end, but his ignorance of something like the Kaliyuga cycle meant that he overestimated the power of reason to transform society in his time. Plato inherited this same faith, constructing visions of ideal politics that have never come to fruition. And the modern West continues to admire their insights, while living in societies where wisdom rarely shapes collective life. The result is that philosophy often appears like a light shining in the darkness, but the darkness of the age refuses to let that light spread widely. Seen this way, Socrates was not living in a fantasy world in the sense of being deluded, but his vision of the supremacy of wisdom was in tension with the hard truth that ages of decline resist the very thing he cherished. That tension remains alive today, and perhaps it explains why philosophy inspires the mind but rarely rules the world.